From their humble appearances to their harsh realities, these towns, portrayed as havens for workers, but actually hide a darker truth of economic exploitation and strict corporate control. But what are the real stories behind their facades? And what was the reason behind labour struggles, corporate influence, and the lasting legacy of these evil towns? Company towns are communities where nearly all the property and services, such as housing, stores, schools, and other amenities, are owned and operated by a single company. These towns became prominent during the early industrial age from 1830 to 1930, known as the Paleotechnic period, which is characterized by basic innovation and labor-intensive processes. These are typically located in underdeveloped areas. Company towns were designed to support industries such as manufacturing companies and mineral extraction, where access to pre-existing urban infrastructure was limited. The company provided housing, amenities, and essential services for employees, owning nearly all real estate and controlling the local economy. This arrangement ensured a steady workforce and facilitated industrial growth, but also fostered a high level of dependence on the company, raising issues of worker autonomy and corporate dominance. In company towns, workers were often treated unfairly. They were frequently confined to fenced or guarded areas, reportedly to protect them from dishonest wandering merchants. However, this was more than just physical control. Companies controlled every part of workers' lives. Moreover, in companies, town employees frequently learned talents that were exclusive to their specific position. This made it harder for them to obtain alternative employment. When the firm closed or fired employees, they typically lacked a place to move and had no idea about alternative employment opportunities. As a result, employees had very little chance to quit and find employment elsewhere. However, company towns relied heavily on one company or industry, making them very vulnerable to economic problems or changes. The company often funded local services, which made the town even more susceptible to tough times. To prevent job losses, it is better for authorities to focus on retraining workers and encouraging them to move to different jobs, rather than just giving financial help. Company towns were controlled by corporations, not just for work, but for nearly every aspect of life. Instead of cash, workers received coupons for company stores, making them dependent and limiting their choices. Housing was controlled too, with rent deducted from their pay. Workers had no say in their schedules or leisure activities, leaving them stuck in a cycle of dependency. These towns were often culturally similar because most workers came from similar backgrounds, but there was still some diversity. Women mostly managed households while men worked, but women also helped build communities. Healthcare and amenities varied, affecting people's health. Company towns show how corporations had huge power over workers' lives during this time. George Pullman's company represented the peak of worker exploitation in the late 1800s. Although Pullman was first recognized for producing luxurious train carriages, he also founded a corporate community close to Chicago, where his workers were governed by strict guidelines, including extravagant rents and restrictions. Conditions were made worse by the circumstances. The Pullman strike of 1894 represented the peak of these tensions. Pullman workers, encouraged by the American Railway Union, ARU, and larger labour movement, went on strike in response to salary cuts during a nationwide economic crisis. The national rail traffic stopped abruptly by the strike, which had a negative impact on the economy. President Grover Cleveland stepped in to maintain order and assure the delivery of US mail. One of the first times federal forces were employed to put an end to a labour conflict, he controversially dispatched federal soldiers to break the strike. More victims and crises were brought on by the intervention. Early in the 20th century, Ludlow, a little mining town in southern Colorado, became the center of labor disputes. A terrible era in American labor history was opened with the Ludlow Massacre of 1914, which revealed the bitter rivalries between miners and the dominant mining companies. Colorado was one of the major coal-producing states at the time, and Ludlow was home to a large immigrant population of miners who worked in hard conditions for low pay. Years had passed as the miners' demands for union authorization, higher salaries, and better working conditions simmered under the surface. John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s Colorado Fuel and Iron Company, CF&I, was a powerful entity that aggressively opposed unionization initiatives. In an effort to unionize Ludlow's miners, the United Mine Workers of America, UMWA, initiated a prolonged strike that began in September 1913. In order to keep things under control as the strike continued into 1940, CF&I used military and private investigators with assistance from the federal government and local law enforcement. When violence started out between the striking miners, their families, and the hired guards in April, the situation became worse. the military and company guards attacked the shelter camp where striking miners and their families lived on April 20th, 1914, bringing the bloodshed to a horrifying climax. Many people died during the hours-long fighting, including women and children who died in a temporary shelter. Although the precise number of deaths is still unknown, estimates range from dozens to over 100. After the unexpected events at Ludlow shocked the nation, the terrible practices used were heavily criticised. After the Ludlow massacre, congressional hearings and inquiries into the actions of CF&I, the state forces, and private investigators implicated were prompted by public outcry. The tragedy increased support for the labour movement, leading to greater scrutiny of company actions and nationwide advocacy for workers' rights. Ludlow came to represent the fight for social justice and labour rights, serving as a reminder to the American people of human suffering, of labour conflicts, and the extent companies will go to in order to oppress organised labour. While Milton Hershey's plan for Hershey, Pennsylvania was more than just an industrial town, it was a comprehensive plan for building a flourishing community. After the Hershey's Chocolate Company was established in 1903, he started building the facilities and infrastructure that his employees and their families would need. The Hershey Industrial School, now Milton Hershey School, which had been providing free education and care for orphaned boys since 1909, and Hershey Park, which was once intended to be a recreational shelter, were at the centre of his idea. In order to guarantee his workers' comfort, he also constructed contemporary, reasonably priced apartments. Along with his charitable initiatives, this integrated approach to community development has solidified Hershey, Pennsylvania as a model industrial town, where social welfare and economic prosperity are closely linked. Company Town's monopolistic dominance was restricted and fair rivalry was encouraged by antitrust laws, which significantly reduced their impact. The goal of these regulations was to stop companies from accumulating excessive influence over labour unions and regional economies. Company towns thus rapidly lost their unchallenged capacity of establishing salaries and working conditions. Utilising collective action like protests and strikes, organised workers took advantage of these regulatory developments to push for better rights, more equitable pay, and safer working conditions. Their rights and safeguards have significantly improved as a result of these initiatives, which also play a key role in fighting exploitative practices. Many of the world's old company towns have evolved into popular tourist attractions or historical sites, representing a complex heritage that highlights the human cost of uncontrolled capitalism. After industrialization, these locations, which were previously under corporate control for workers' management and industrial production, now face societal issues and financial difficulties. They act as disturbing reminders of ethical issues related to equality in society, corporate power, and sustainable development. These towns' conversion to tourist destinations raises important questions about how to strike a balance between exploitation and economic advancement, as well as the ongoing discussions about the best ways to preserve their historical relevance while meeting modern socio-economic demands. As we wrap up, it's clear these communities were more than just housing for workers. They were hubs of power and control. Understanding their impact helps us reflect on how corporate influence shaped social dynamics then and continues to influence them today. What do you think about the lasting impact of company towns on society today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.